Please rise for the tolling of the bell. And be seated. Good afternoon. My name is Karen Herring, and I welcome you to this memorial service as we celebrate the life and mourn the death of Lynnanne Warren. We gather with a small number of family and friends here at Unity Church-Unitarian in St. Paul, Minnesota, where Lynnanne made her spiritual home. She joined this faith community 42 years ago, and she was an active member here. We gather online as well to include all of you who cannot be here today, those of you near and far, extending Lynnanne's own way of welcoming all and building community and connection. We meet today for this time outside of time, made holy by our attention and our presence, both the presence of community gathered in person and online, and by the presence of grief and loss sitting side by side with love and life. We honor Lynnanne's way of cherishing both family and friends, welcoming those of you who are here in person, and also extending to all those of you who are viewing this online from places here in the Twin Cities, extending an invitation to come down to the church after the service is over and to join Jim and the rest of the family outside in the green space for an outdoor reception. We hope you'll come and join us too. So we light the chalice now as we begin for this sacred gathering in time, remembering a life devoted to friendship and learning, to love and to connection, to community, and to the tending that keeps community strong and well. For all this and more, we light the chalice today.
Universe is the ocean I travel. wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home.
Please rise in body or in spirit and join me in the responsive reading printed in your order of worship. We remember them. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember them. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember them. In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember them. In the blueness of the sky and in the warmth of summer, we remember them. In the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember them. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember them. When we have joys, when we are weary and in need of strength, we remember them. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember them. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember them. So long as we live, they too shall live, for they are now a part of us as we remember them. Please be seated. As we gather today in gratitude for Lynnanne's life, we also give voice to our sorrow and give shape to the farewell that now finally must be said. We gather today as people of different faiths and different beliefs, bringing many questions that accompany our sorrow. Why did we have to lose Lynnanne so soon? Why, with an illness that took her from us slowly over the years following her stroke? And why, in a time of pandemic, making it so hard to properly gather in memory and celebration of her life? The questions linger in our grief, and though this gathering of remembrance, love, and honor offers no simple answers, surely it unveils a deeper knowing that the spirit of life rings out even in the silences of death, that the suffering Lynnanne experienced in her illness is now over, and that the goodness that was within her will be her guardian forevermore. We learn from death the preciousness of life and the lasting nature of love that grows beyond it. And in this and every loss, we are asked to let our grief teach us, to name and honor what was good and unique in our loved one who has died, and to make room in our own lives to carry that on, to live those values out in the world as our true inheritance and as Lynnanne's lasting legacy. Perhaps the most basic lesson grief has to teach us is this: to settle in with the silences of loss, with the embrace of love that reaches beyond the physical presence of our loved ones and that holds us, comforts us, even guides us when they are gone. I share with you these words chosen by Lynnanne's beloved Jim for this service, words from David Breeden, poet and ministerial colleague of mine from the other side of the Mississippi, here in the Twin Cities. The poem is What Loss Means. Just as the last leaves on branches in autumn fail to cast shade, so the words we cast to fill the silence left by one we loved never are enough. No words are, Though a few hang in the silence to fill a slice of absence, like any sound, words will break the spell silence casts for a little time, and even sometimes over again. Words may stir the afternoon, words forming in one light, and the dust motes might fall into meaning. Words may soothe the night's stark quiet. And so we carry words in our minds, in our hearts, to fill the vast silence of what it means to be alive, which is what loss means. Friends, loss itself teaches us what it means to be alive, just as love itself teaches us that letting go is the necessary result of carrying one tenderly within our heart. In the midst of loss, we are also reminded that new grief often reawakens older grief. Our sorrow over Lynnanne's death might call up with fresh sadness the loss of loved ones who died recently or long ago, as well as the sorrows present in this pandemic time. Do not be afraid of grief's return and lingering. Find your own ways of befriending it. And it will help you to carry the sorrows of this time as well as your memories of Lynnanne and other dear ones no longer with you. Grief can be a doorway to the loving presence of our ancestors. Ancestors by blood or ancestors by choice, whose lives have illuminated and blessed our own. Please join me now in a moment of silence, in tribute and in welcome to all the beloved ancestors waiting on the doorsteps of our hearts to join us on this day. And will you pray with me? Holy One, known by many names and beyond all naming, Spirit of life and love, we give thanks for the life of Lynnanne Warren and for the love and friendship she shared so generously with so many. As we devote this holy time to stories of her life, may we not leave sorrow behind too quickly. May our hearts, now broken open by our grief, remain open long enough for her gifts to find their own place in our lives, that her love of people, of learning, and of nature, of friendship, of industriousness and joy will continue on in our own stories. Open our hearts today and always to these and other cherished blessings that Lynnanne shared in her life, her caring, and her being. In the name of love, we pray. Amen. We'll now hear from Bill Leslie, Jim Leslie's brother, who will read Jim's tribute. Come on up around here.
Good afternoon. Can everyone hear me okay? Good.
You can take your mask off.
Okay. I'm going to leave my mask on because if I take my mask off, my hearing aids pop off. So Sorry about that. Remembrance for Lynnanne Warren by her husband, Jim Leslie. Since Lynnanne's death a month ago, I've received many notes, letters, emails, and even some phone calls expressing sorrow over my lovely wife's passing. Words often repeated in describing Lynnanne were kind, friendly, generous, helpful, empathetic, committed, fiercely independent, fun-loving, curious, and humble. As her husband for the last 30 years, I can attest to the fact that all of these words describe Lynnanne wonderfully well. Here are but a few instances of the numerous ways that my wife showed her abundant love for everyone. One example is that Lynnanne always made sure that she served her stepdaughter Margaret's favorite foods whenever Margaret came home from college. Another example is that Lynnanne had a strong belief that no one in society should be homeless, and she followed through on her belief by spending any number of nights with homeless families here in the basement of this church. Lynnanne often volunteered to help neighbors on our California Avenue block in Falcon Heights with many different tasks and never claimed credit for it. As a teacher, Lynnanne worked endlessly on lesson plans for her classes. She also took a very genuine interest in the lives of her nieces and nephews. Lynnanne loved maintaining her simple cabin on Butternut Lake near Cumberland, Wisconsin, that she helped build over 50 years ago. She delighted in hosting gatherings of her women friends at that cabin. And finally, I have never met a person who knew better than Lynnanne how to have fun, like the time when Lynnanne threw a surprise birthday party, for me on my 50th birthday. For that milestone event, I was blindfolded. I was driven around by Lynnanne and Margaret before eventually arriving at the party site. Along the way, the two of them delighted in asking me to guess our final destination, which I did not succeed in doing. 35 years ago, I asked Lynnanne out on a date. That decision would prove to be one of the best decisions of my life, because we quickly fell in love, and that love would endure until Lynnanne's passing a month ago. Lynnanne was my lover, my pick-me-upper when I was down, my frequent companion on walks around Como Lake, my wise teacher in ways practical and ways spiritual, but most of all, she was my best friend. I miss Lynnanne, my true soulmate, more than words can possibly express.
Thank you, Bill, for reading that, and Jim for writing it. Karen Buggs, who is a member of this church and a longtime friend of Lynnanne's, will now share a memory from her.
I'm going to take off the mask. I'm Karen Buggs. Lynnanne was a dear friend of mine. We shared many hours at Unity Church, at services, events, and projects such as caring for the Unity Gardens and Circle Suppers and Project Home. Her unique, simple cabin on Butternut Lake, that's been mentioned before, in Wisconsin, provided so many summers of canoeing, swimming, caring for her land, conversations with friends, saunas, and stargazing. Lynnanne and I loved the constellations. We spent a lot of time on the end of her dock looking at the stars. My friend Julie and her friend, a teaching colleague, recalls with loving gratitude when Lynnanne strongly advised her, that is, advised Julie to max out her IRA contributions when she was 35 years old. Today, that allowed Julie to fund college for 5 grandchildren. She was wise, that Lynnanne. Another friend, Alice, treasures the memories of the many Christmas holidays and birthdays that she, Lynnanne, and I celebrated together. It was a sweet commitment, and we maintained it for many, many years. 5 years ago, a stroke robbed Lynnanne of her zest and her energy. Cookies and short visits replaced our active past. Goodbye, dear friend. I treasure the memory of your sweet smile and your kindnesses.
And Polly Perrin Grant will deliver memories from almost all of the Perrin siblings.
Our remembrances and thoughts of living with Lynnanne vary. I told Karen I wasn't going to cry. However, each are caring and true. Lynnanne was the big sister to 3 brothers and 3 sisters, and these are read in the order of birth. From my sister Jean, Lynnanne was kind and generous to me as I studied my way through medical school. She provided living space and good food on several occasions when I was in St. Paul. During that time, I was involved with the building of her beloved cabin on the lake in Wisconsin. These memories will always be with me. Thank you, Lynnanne. From the next Peter, Big Sis didn't have to help fix breakfast for the 9 parents. She stayed upstairs and got ready for school. But then after breakfast, she got to clean up the dishes. Lynnanne studied diligently among the noise that 6 siblings could produce. She was quite intelligent and dedicated to her desires to be a teacher. In the 80s, she brought our mother to Australia to visit my family when we lived there. A special trip for both. From me, Lynnanne was always trying to be helpful and enjoyed teaching me things. When I was 14 or 15, she decided I needed to learn some manners. So she taught me how to set a proper dinner table, where the napkin goes, and how to fold it, and which pieces of silverware to use for which courses. I was never invited to dine with the royal family or the U.S. president, but I am officially prepared. And from Tom, as a caring big sister, Lynnanne thought enough of the younger siblings' enrichment to take us to see The Sound of Music in Indianapolis. The show was inspiring. In 2006, my car was stolen from my work site, and she asked what was taken. I told her about my favorite CDs, and a few days later, I received a Boston and Styx CD from her. I doubt she liked either group, but cared enough to replace them for me. And from Lissa, the youngest, I am the youngest of Lynnanne's siblings. She was very proud of my twin brother, Gary, and I when we were born. She went up and down the street telling the neighbors about us. She was like a second mom to me, combing my hair and dressing me. She moved away from our house when I was about 6 years old to teach in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and I miss the love and affection she gave me. Later on, when she and her first husband, Jim, came home at Christmas time, driving all the way from Minnesota, I was bursting with anticipation to see her, and I would run outside to greet them. I would also cry when they left. Years went by, and within the last few years, we talked about the differences of being the oldest and being the youngest. I found out that when she went away to college, she earned a full-ride scholarship, including housing to Ball State Teachers College in our hometown. But because she felt so much responsibility to be at home helping our mom with us kids, she moved out of the dorm and came back home. It made me very sad about what she gave up to come home. Another thing was, we talked about she never got to go have a Coke at the Student Center the whole time she was in college. Again, I was saddened by this because I spent hours partying and playing euchre at the Student Center, having Cokes. Some big differences, yes. Rest in peace, Lynnanne, for you have earned it. I love you, Lynnanne. Lynnanne cared about each of us, and we returned that care and love in different ways and times.
In a loving tribute to Lynnanne, written the day after she died, Lynnanne's stepdaughter, Margaret, wrote that she had never met a person more deeply invested in adult friendships than Lynnanne was, and that Lynnanne's cultivation of friendships served for Margaret as a model for her own friendships. In the spirit of that tribute, we share today 4 sayings from the always wise Winnie the Pooh on friendship, chosen by Jim Leslie in memory of Lynnanne. And I have to believe Lynnanne would be smiling to hear this. The first says, "If you live to be 100, I hope to be 100 minus 1 day so that I never have to live a day without you." It isn't much good having anything exciting if you can't share it with somebody. A day without a friend is like a pot without a single drop of honey inside it. And finally, if there ever comes a day when we can't be together, keep me in your heart. I'll stay there forever. Lynnanne Perrin was born in Muncie, Indiana in 1939, the first of 7 children, to parents Leonores and Bernard Perrin. In the house the Perrin children all grew up in, Lynnanne became her younger siblings' trusted caregiver and her mother's able helper. With both parents working outside of the home by the time Lynnanne was school age, and a father suffering from alcoholism, there was much to be done in the house. And Lynnanne's mother, rising to the challenge of what one of you called herding cats, made sure that each child had daily chores and weekend tasks. And Lynnanne had these too, as you have heard. But she also cared for her younger siblings as a bit of a second mother. But somehow, in the demanding and sometimes noisy, busy household of so many young ones, she was also a very dedicated student. From her earliest days, devoted to learning. And as all of you parent children did, Lynnanne lived out your mother's wishes for you to succeed in high school, to go on to college, and to use what you learned to make your way through life and to make a difference in the world. I understand that each of you has done that in your own ways. For Lynnanne, that meant attending Ball State University on a full scholarship and earning a degree in teaching, later supplemented by her graduate work in education at the University of Minnesota. No one could contest it. Lynnanne was bright, disciplined, and devoted both to learning and to teaching. While at the U of M, Lynnanne met Jim Warren, and the two were married. She took an elementary teaching position in the Roseville School District, where Jim Warren also taught. It was the beginning of a 34-year teaching career in Roseville, earning her a reputation as a good listener, both to her colleagues and to her students. A fierce and stubborn advocate in the teachers' union, serving as its president in the 1970s, and a caring and much-loved teacher to hundreds of children in the 2nd through 5th grades. As one of you told me, it was a natural fit. Leading and caring for children was what she knew and did so well from her earliest years in the Perrin family. In her dedication to her students, she did just about anything in their interest, including taking on the sex education unit with her 5th graders one year, leading to the story that was told at her 25th year work anniversary gathering about how many shades of red Lynnanne turned when the principal decided to pay a visit to her classroom to observe her teaching at the very moment that Lynnanne was talking about testicles and ovaries. She did what had to be done, especially in the name of learning, teaching, and being a good friend. Demonstrating the Perrin family's characteristic determination, she and her first husband spent several summers building a cabin on Butternut Lake that you've heard about in these earlier remembrances. This was with the assistance of friends and family. Some of you here and some of you watching online, you knew what went into that building. The rustic but well-built cabin with its beautiful view of the lake would become both a retreat from the noise and activity of teaching and city life, and a place for friendships to deepen, for sharing saunas and stargazing, as Karen Buggs noted, for boating and reading, conversation, and Lynnanne's great gift of listening, as if you were the only other person in the world. Also, in her way of always wanting to manage the world around her, it included occasional and, I understand, mostly unsuccessful canoe trips to find beaver dams and to poke holes in them in an effort to keep the water flowing in the lake. She was a force of nature. By the mid-1970s, Lynnanne's first marriage came to an end, in part due to the shadow alcoholism casts on the loved ones of those who suffer from it. Lynnanne had known that shadow as a child and was not willing to live in it as an adult. In the early years following her divorce, though, she continued her gift of nurturing friendships, new and old. Joining Unity Church in 1979 gave her a place to share that gift and many others. Here in these pews and these halls, in the kitchen and the classroom, she brought her offerings of kindness and hard work, of generosity and good listening, always willing to step up when she saw a need. Our former music director, Ruth Palmer, remembers her own attempts to frantically manage all the elements of the annual holiday concert. It was not only a concert, but also a potluck and a dessert buffet. You can see why she was frantic. Then she said she ran into Lynnanne in the hallway. Or rather, Lynnanne stepped in front of Ruth in the hallway, blocked her path, and as Ruth tells it, Lynnanne stood her ground, looked me square in the eyes, and said quite emphatically, "You need help." Ruth said, and so it was. For many years, Lynnanne took care of all the kitchen and hostess needs so I could focus on the choirs. Loving commitment and amazing energy were all hallmark gifts of hers. We might also note in Ruth Palmer's story that it is also a demonstration of Lynnanne's stubbornness, which came up more than once in conversations with some of you as a trademark of Lynnanne's. Thank goodness she often put it to good use for all of us. In the 1980s, Lynnanne and Jim Leslie began dating, and in 1991 were married right here at Unity Church in the courtyard in a ceremony that was co-officiated by the then minister of Unity Church, Roy Phillips, and Gary Rearson, minister at Plymouth Congregational Church, where Jim was and still is a member. It was the beginning of a long and loving relationship that made room for difference, not only in church memberships, but also in lake homes and personality types. As someone once observed to them, theirs was a marriage with a lot of yin and yang both, in which they came to respect each other's independence while also knowing how to say, "I'm sorry." This played out in the couple's lake homes. Lynnanne kept the cabin at Butternut Lake as her favorite place for solitude and nature, where she went to recharge her batteries, while Jim kept his lake home on Pine Lake, 50 miles away, as a place for community and gatherings. They would often spend their time separately at these two places, and I was delighted to learn they would periodically meet halfway in between at a supper club in Rice Lake, where they would get reacquainted. With her friends, Lynnanne was known as caring and energetic, and often both teaching and learning. Karen Buggs, in her comments, talked about stargazing at the end of the dock on Butternut Lake. She told me that they would often gaze up at those stars and take turns teaching each other the constellations they knew. And I think that's the way Lynnanne was. She'd share what she knew with you, and she'd be grateful if you shared what you knew with her. She also liked to be of service, humbly, without calling attention to her work. She and Karen and many others volunteered together for many years as overnight hosts here at Unity Church when the church participated in Project Home, providing shelter for families without homes for a month each year. Bringing this sense of service home to her family, Lynnanne was also a strong and caring support to her stepson Ted when he developed brain cancer in 1999 and later died of that illness in late 2000. Lynnanne accompanied Ted through many hospitalizations and chemo treatments and cared for him at home. After Ted's death, she and Jim thoughtfully and together processed the deep grief from that loss, letting it bring them together instead of dividing them apart. But Lynnanne also knew how to have fun. With Jim and many friends, she enjoyed Twin Cities culture, especially opera, symphony, and theater performances. She attended Ragamala's Indian dance performances and for a time took belly dancing lessons herself. She was a voracious reader, and in retirement she traveled with Jim to Ireland, France, and Spain. And then in 2016, as you know, Lynnanne suffered a stroke and was diagnosed with vascular dementia, and the terms of her lifelong fierce independence shifted dramatically. Not that she gave up quickly, mind you. 2 years after her stroke, on a trip to Butternut Lake with Jim, she still thought she could fetch a ladder to work on the side of the cabin when Jim wasn't looking. Many bruises and a few minor injuries later, that would be her last time to fix the cabin. But not her last trip to the cabin, nor her last time of traveling to share time with loved ones. In 2019, her family, so important to her throughout her life, gathered in Indiana for her 80th birthday party. The last time the Perrin siblings were all together, and such a special time for her and for all of you before COVID came into the world. Closer to home, as her own strength and mobility waned, Lynnanne visited church as long as she could, stayed in touch with friends and family, emailing and calling to the degree she could, almost to the end of her life. "I need some cookies," she would say on the phone to one of her friends. Perhaps as much a call for a visit as it was for the cookies. Jim, as her primary caregiver for so long, and then her daily visitor when she needed full-time care at Shalom, you, more than most, witnessed her slow departure. And still, you cherished the time you two had together. On the night before her death, as on so many other evenings before, you helped her into her nightie, lifted her into bed where you two cuddled and said goodnight before you left. And the next morning, the staff from Shalom called to say that Lynnanne had died quietly in the night. Some say that another star shines in the night sky when a loved one dies. Perhaps. Or perhaps it is the light of love shining from the depths of our own hearts, reflected back to us in the darkness and the silence that unfolds us in our sorrow. As we close the service today, I invite you to ask, what twinkling light or bright star from Lynnanne's life and your time shared with her is shining still in your own heart? And how will you carry that light on with gratitude and gladness for all the gifts she gave to you? Chris Anweiss will sing for us a favorite song of Lynnanne's and Jim's, the Appalachian hymn titled Bright Morning Stars.
Bright morning stars are rising. Bright morning stars are rising. Bright morning stars are rising. Days are breaking in my soul. Oh, where are our dear mothers? Oh, where are our dear mothers? Oh, where are our dear mothers? Days are breaking in my soul. They are sowing seeds of gladness. They are sowing are sowing seeds of gladness. Day is a-breaking in my soul. Oh, where are our dear fathers? Oh, where are our dear fathers? Oh, where are our dear fathers? Day is a-breaking in my soul. They are in the fields a-plowing. They are in the fields a-plowing. They are in the fields a-plowing. Day is a-breaking in my soul.
After the benediction, friends, the family invites all of you and those of you online who are in the Twin Cities to come to Unity Church and join the outdoor reception, or come into the parish hall where there's a wonderful set of displays of photos from Lynnanne's life, as well as some remembrances, a collage of voices from several members of this church. So now, as we close, may the light of love and learning that Lynnanne shared so generously with all of us keep shining within our hearts, and may we each carry that light out into the world, shining it brightly. It's worth sharing. Blessed be, and amen.